us today on this Friday, right before the weekend. I know it's been a busy week for everybody. But real quick, I just wanted to start off with a quick presentation. I'm going to share my screen and then I will happily introduce our speaker, Lou. Let's see here. All right. Are you guys able to see my screen okay?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, so today's workshop host is Lou Hughes. Did I say it right?
Yes, perfect.
Awesome. He's the CEO of Moving Minds, and it's going to be over building a scalable MarTech organization. So for those of you who don't know who we are, we're Palm Beach Tech. We're a nonprofit, and our goal is to build South Florida into a tech hub. And we do so by creating different resources, events, networking opportunities, and just connecting our talent all the way from the younger generation, the kids who are learning how to code, to our top level CEOs. And in between, we provide value through the events, the networking, the programs that we offer on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, so this is a little bit more about who we are. We have right now 200 corporate members involved, and we actually have some big events coming up that I wanted to share, especially our hackathon. It's coming up October 23rd to the 25th. And what's exciting about this hackathon is our mission is coding for good. So we're going to provide some nonprofits that need help with tech, and the winner of the hackathon not only gets to win a cash prize, they get to implement the project that they created and help a local nonprofit. So that's something that we're really excited about. And if you look below, you're able to see some of our community partners as well, who are aligned with our mission of building South Florida into a tech hub. All right, so this is just our community creed. If you guys haven't heard it or seen it yet, we're a wholeheartedly community committed to building a welcoming, collaborative, and inclusive community for all. And you can also learn more at palmbeachtech.org. And these are just a few of our current members. We have City Furniture, Office Depot, Florida Crystals. And if you could actually see, we have a wide range of different sectors. So we have PGA, and then we have DSS, that's more of a healthcare, and then City Furniture is a tech company that does furniture. That's what they're referred as in Florida Crystals. So it's really exciting. And we actually have Jupiter Medical Center as well. Lou works really close with them. So I think that's really cool. You can definitely share a little bit more about that. So these are just a few of our weekly events. Right now we have 4 events per week. Our Tech Talks are Monday nights, and we do a little bit of networking before. So if you haven't checked that out, you should definitely come. And then community coffees are more of a panel discussion on Tuesdays at 8 a.m. So we bring in leaders from our community and talk about certain things that can impact or that our community has questions about. And Wednesdays are a podcast where we interview, the top level CEOs, entrepreneurs, and just the people making our community so great. And then today we have our workshop. So every Friday we bring in one of our members, and they're able to share some expertise and deliver you guys value overall. All right, so yeah, this is the hackathon that I mentioned, and I will gladly drop in some more information in the chat. And these are just some of our presenting sponsors: Office Depot, FPL, Venture Cafe, and Media Ops. And it's obviously going to be all virtual. All right, and these are just a few of our membership benefits. We do newsletters. We have member profiles on our website. We do speaking opportunities like this one for Lou. We highlight our members when they succeed in our community or making a difference. And we also have exclusive peer groups that connect the leaders within our community based on your expertise as well. So if you haven't done so, please text your email to this number on the screen, and we're able to include you in our newsletter and just send you some weekly updates that we do on a daily. All right, so that's it for now. Lou, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and you can go ahead and share yours, and we're so excited to have you.
All right, thank you everybody. I appreciate it, Monica. Thanks for the introduction. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yep.
All right, let me see if I can. We're using a new tool, which I have not used before, so hopefully it'll work okay. We're expanding beyond the typical PowerPoint presentation. We're using something called Figma, which is a new software application, web-based software application. So we'll see how it goes. But let me share my screen at full capacity here. and see if you can see it. Okay, it should be full screen. Does that look okay?
Yeah, looks good.
All right, terrific. So thanks for everybody for being here. I'm delighted to be a member of Palm Beach Tech. Actually, Palm Beach Tech is one of the reasons why Moving Minds is in Palm Beach, really. We decided about 2 years ago to relocate our company from North Florida down to Palm Beach. And we were one of the first organizations we recognized as a thought leader in the space, because so much of what we do is technology oriented, because marketing has changed and shifted dramatically from the past. We have new tools, and we'll talk a little bit about that today, about some of the tools we use and then some of the tools that are available to us as marketers. But certainly one of the reasons why we're here is because of the work that Joe Russo has done, and certainly Nikki and Monica. So we're delighted to be a member, delighted to have also pulled in Jupiter Medical Center, which is really a technology company in and of itself. Even though you think of it as a medical center, what they're doing is a lot of innovation technology-wise. So it's a great fit for both Moving Minds and also Jupiter Medical Center. So let's get started. So today we wanted to talk, and we've got a lot to cover. So if I'm going fast, if you want to interrupt, please do. Keep the chat open. And then if you don't want to speak during the presentation, we'll obviously answer any questions you have afterwards. But today's topic is building a marketing tech organization designed for scalable growth. And the way that marketing has evolved is kind of amazing over the last 5 years. So when you think about the common pitfalls we all face in executing multi-channel programs, how do you align marketing budgets to growth targets, blending the art and now the science of marketing, and then of course, as you build a MarTech stack organizationally, what are the elements of that in order to succeed and to sustain the growth that you want to have? So as far as Moving Minds, let me give you a sense of what we do. We essentially provide outsourced marketing solutions. So we enable companies of really all sizes. We work with a lot of startups. We work with a lot of well-funded companies and more mature organizations that want to move faster and smarter. So if you think about the way organizations are generally built, it takes 6 months to hire somebody in a leadership position. It takes another 9 months to fill some of the functional roles in a marketing organization. What we do is we snap on an organization that already exists, a fractional team, to an organization to support their marketing and technology. And that's essentially what we're doing for Jupiter Medical Center, where they have 2 people internally, and then we have a team of about 12 to anywhere 25 other people that contribute to the work that we do on an ongoing daily basis. So we're really running their programs across all of their channels. So let me scale this down a little bit. Okay. So we all, we're all marketers. We all have the same common challenges, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Certainly one of the biggest is the proliferation of new channels, from TikTok to Snapchat to all types of different platforms. There are more channels than ever. So that poses a lot of benefits to us in being able to target, but also challenges a lot of us in how do you allocate the resources that we have, because each channel is time intensive and requires a certain level of expertise. And then blending those things together, right? So it's not just doing one channel alone, because generally that doesn't have an accumulated effect. You have to have concentrated force in your marketing efforts, which means you have to execute across channels. And it's very challenging when you have limited resources or limited personnel. Measurement. This is what causes CMOs to only last, 23 months in a position generally. It's because they don't have the ability to measure. So how do we put the mechanisms in measure to measure our performance and the investments that we have, which substantiates the reason why we exist and provide value to the organizations that we work for. And as I mentioned, you've got to figure out how to allocate the resources. So we just met with a client yesterday. We were looking at their overall budget and trying to be careful about, not spreading their budget too thin across too many channels, and really deciding how, at what point is a certain level of budget dedicated to a channel effective, and when you get to the point where you don't have enough budget to really do it effectively, and you probably should drop it from your mix. Technology, as I mentioned, has changed. We have more tools than ever. So we've got new channels, but we also have new software technologies that allow us to do things that we would never have been able to do, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. And that whole business of MarTech is exploding. We're seeing a lot of growth. It started with CRM and it hits Virgin. And we'll talk a little bit about some of those tools as well. data, right? So this is the part that no one wants to deal with, but it's the lifeblood of your business. So the data that you have generally is, when we find clients, is it's poorly managed, and it's not very good in the first place. So you really have to manage the data, because you can't execute marketing programs without having great data. And so in some cases we clean data for clients, and in others we append their data by using other third parties to really create an infrastructure to be able to communicate outwardly with our outbound sales and marketing programs. And then orchestrating the talent, right? So it's there's such specialties now: Facebook advertising, Google advertising, print advertising, media buying. All of these things require a certain level of skill sets, and you can hire jacks of all trades, but as we see the proliferation of channels, it becomes very challenging for people to learn new skill sets. So we blend that on a fractional basis to execute these multi-channel programs, and clients are not having to build functional teams with certain skill sets, because you need 25 people to execute programs across all of these channels. So how do you align budgets to growth targets? So talk a little bit about that. You need to know what you're measuring. There's a lot of businesses that frankly don't know what their KPIs are. So we need to make sure that, working with management and leadership, that you know exactly what is going to impact the business, and that we put the right mechanisms in place to be able to track those things. Some of those indicators and key metrics are things that you're probably very familiar with, right? These are very high level. Cost per acquisition, customer lifetime value, conversion rate at each stage of the funnel, conversion rate per channel, and duration of the sales cycle. So these are some of the things that we generally put in place. It requires the right systems, right? And then processes to be able to convert these. But a lot of businesses don't measure to this degree and level of detail. And it's really essential to be able to allocate the investments and substantiate our reason for being as marketers. So we've got sources of revenue being another. So there's new tools now, one of which is called Visible. This is a tool that we use for different clients, and it's an expensive software package. So it works only really for more enterprise scale clients. But in Visible, this gives us essentially a sense of ties the source of the customer from the acquisition source to the actual revenue recognition. So it's a phenomenal tool. So as you can see on the left-hand side under the magnifying glass, the channels. So you see social media, SEO, and other traditional forms, and then you can attribute that to market. So this is, essential to being able to, again, substantiate the reason for being. And there are tools that just didn't exist, 3 to 5 years ago, and now gives us the ability to really prove our mettle as a marketer. The other thing that people don't really think about is the acquisition model, and some are more sophisticated than others, but in a healthcare environment, they don't think in these terms, whereas in software, they do think in these terms. So different industries have different levels of sophistication, and we try to bring that level of sophistication to all of our clients, which is would take 2+ years to really build internally. So you have to understand what the acquisition model is. And this is, the funnel. Most of you are probably intimately familiar with this. So you have high level top of awareness all the way down to the revenue recognition. Understanding each conversion rate through that process is really essential, even for healthcare, like where you're dealing with patient acquisition or patient volume, not just sort of e-commerce related. E-commerce might be a little bit easier to measure in that regard. So these are more of the funnel metrics. So you've got bounce rates and impressions and average time on site. And a lot of these tools are spread across different. So you've got analytics, you've got visibles, you've got all of these different things, and sort of combining them into a singular dashboard can be kind of challenging. But there are new tools like Whategraph, which has a great product for aggregating all of your analytics across all of these disparate platforms, which again, give us a better sense of how these things are all working together. And then again, which sources of customers are going to be more effective, whether it's direct mail or traditional print, which is kind of how we've heavily weighted the Jupiter Medical Center buys, versus a more digital approach where we might have a younger target customer base. And then you've got open rates, lead volume, lead scores, and then down to the most critical element is revenue attribution. Without that, you're toast as a marketer, really. You have to be realistic, right? So, either over-promising, and I think that's one of the disconnects why we see CMOs not lasting particularly long in organizations, because one, they don't have the ability to put the measurement in place, But there's I think a lack of realism with regard to senior management about what marketing is and what it should be doing and delivering. And I think there's a lot of disconnect there. And of course, that relates to how you generate buy-in from your leadership team. And you have to have the metrics to be able to do that. So let me jump to a case study of a client in terms of realism. So we had a client that wanted to launch a new initiative. And we sort of just did the math for them. You know, we said, okay, well, they want to launch it. They had to hire new people. They had to extend certain hours. And their goal was 500 consultations. So what we do is we generally flip the funnel and provide an analysis to them before they initiate something like this, to sort of validate, like, what is realistic amount of budget for us to be able to drive this particular result. So this is a very high level sort of measurement that I'll give you a sense of. So their goal was 500 consultations. The digital advertising for just the keywords specific to this type of offering is anywhere from $550 to $850. So it's very expensive. And as you look at the acquisition, the funnel model, you see the math, right? So you have a landing page conversion rate of 8.5% that we built for them. 2.5% is generally the industry average. They had to generate roughly 10,000 click-throughs, right? So the total ad spend in order to be able to do that is $55,000 to $85,000. And the booked revenue associated with 500 consultations is about $70,000, right? So you're talking about an additional cost of labor for this particular service, $35,000 on an annualized basis. So if you just do the math and reverse the funnel, you're talking about a loss of $20,000 to $70,000, right? So they have no concept of the costs of marketing. And so we try to help them. You know, it's one thing to be sort of act in our own self-interest, which is to launch something, but we don't want our clients to fail. So we try to provide, a realistic view of what marketing costs. They had no idea that they'd have to spend $85,000 in marketing. They just thought they'd turn on the lights and people would come, and that's not the case. So unless in this particular case, they view this as a loss leader, that there's a longer customer lifetime value, maybe of 3 years, that might be $3,500. This is not a smart initiative to launch. And if it is in fact a loss leader, and we do have the ability to extend that relationship beyond 3 years, then it actually does make sense. But in this case, they didn't have the measurements in place to be able to look at the longer term value. And on a short term basis, this is a loser, right? So before they can initiate something, we're telling them, like, this is not a wise idea. Let's look at other ways to try to drive growth. And that gives you a sense of the analysis that we generally provide. And so that's being realistic, is to tie into the leadership, right? You've got to have the buy-in of your leadership team, and it wavers. I mean, some people some leaders, CEOs, are huge advocates of marketing. Some of them are very, very, very suspicious and cynical about marketing's role. And I think it's just a lack of understanding. So one of the roles as marketers, we have to advocate every day. And I think showing them the ability to look at, real measurements and analytics gives us the credibility within the organization to advocate for our position. And it's not always that we're advocating to do things in marketing. In some cases, it's telling them this is probably not the right thing to do. And I think that helps a lot. And then, looking at the spend, right? So it's one thing to develop a budget, but if you don't have a baseline for what your competitors are spending, you're kind of floating on an island. You have no idea. And it's critically important because you can use that information, obviously, to advocate for more budget. And then you can also look at spend. So in terms of tools, how do we get that information? Well, there's a tool called SEMrush. We use that for all of our clients. It does a few things. Actually, it's a very diverse tool. It's an awesome tool. It's expensive, but it's worth the money. We use it to measure position tracking for keywords we do a lot of SEO work. We also do content marketing. So we want to measure the performance of the investments that we're making on those fronts. So we track the position in search results for certain keywords, and it's critically important to validate, the expense and the investment that we make in content marketing. So, but it also gives us other analytics. So in some cases, it gives us the ability to look at our competitors in terms of how much they're spending in paid search and also in display advertising. So in the section that I've annotated at the very top, you see that they're generating or spending about 61K in paid search, and that's having a pretty big impact. I think that's 37% of their traffic to their website is generated through that particular level of spend. Now, that's expensive, right, to be able to do that, but it is driving growth. And if they have the ability to measure the funnel, they can attribute that spend to an actual result. And then on the right-hand side, you can see that they're not spending any money on display. Now, in this particular client, in a lot of cases, they are doing display. So we have the ability to look specifically at what they are doing. And then we have the ability to also look at their messaging, all of their creative, their banner designs, and to look and see how their messaging works. So in this case, we do a drill down. This is eastbay.com, which is a company I just sort of picked out of the air. It's an e-commerce company, but we have the ability to look at their ad content. And so we're not going to steal their content, but we kind of look and see if it's successful for them. Perhaps we should leverage some of what they're doing. We can fold that into our own go-to-market positioning and your ad copy and so forth. So it's a great tool, something we use a lot. And again, you sort of take the information from this particular tool and then you use it to advocate for your position and for your budget. And that's sort of you versus the industry, right? So what is the right level of spend for your industry, right? So healthcare is very different than consumer packaged goods. Software is very different. And I think it's also helpful not just to look at competitor spend, but also just on an industry-wide level, what is traditionally the level of investment. So in here you see consumer packaged goods. They're spending 24% of their revenue on marketing. You think about consumer packaged goods, it's all retail, it's consumer focused, it's national. So it makes sense that they would be spending a greater proportion of their revenue on. It's expensive to do national television advertising, right? So whereas in some industries we can more target through geo-marketing and targeting and that nature. Tech and bio is a leader generally in marketing. They're fast-growing companies. We'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. They're spending anywhere from 15%, which actually seems a little bit low based on the samples that I'll share with you. And then all the way down to manufacturing, which is 8%, not traditionally an advocate for marketing. And then healthcare is at 10%. So again, you can kind of baseline this to see where you are relative to your competitors in your industry. In this case, you correlate the level of investment with the rate of growth. So in this case, you're looking at technology companies that are fast growing and emerging. And the leadership of these companies knows that there's tremendous value in acquiring new customers, and they're willing to spend the money to be able to do that, and certainly disproportionate. Now they have the buy-in from their board of directors. They're probably venture-backed, private equity-backed, so they understand that they have a 3 to 5 year window in this case to try to sell the company. So one of the reasons why they used outsourced marketing is to get a marketing team built in a rapid period of time, and then what's the right level of investment. So in this case, you've got MindBody, Salesforce, Tableau, Bottom Line Technologies. You see 51 to 39% of revenue invested in sales. You got 31% rate of growth, 25% rate of growth. So again, you can see that the investments is being made in marketing, so long as you can measure it, has a direct impact on growth. And I think that's obviously critical for us to be successful as marketers. In this case, even in technology, you have slower growing companies like Microsoft, Google, Oracle. They're still spending 11.9 to anywhere from 22% of revenue. And they're having a slower rate of growth. But for Google, 23% in revenue is billions of dollars, right? So it gets harder as you get bigger to grow at a rapid rate. In manufacturing, you've got companies like IDEX Laboratories, Johnson & Johnson, 17% of revenue, 27% of revenue. And again, slower rates of growth, but nevertheless, rates of growth, which is critically important. And then as you see sort of the lower level of spend, the lower rate of growth. So again, using this information to advocate for your position, looking at competitors in your market is critically important to being able to rationalize to your senior executive team for the budget that you desperately need. Let's talk about the art and science of marketing. It's changed a lot, as I indicated. We saw one of those tools is Visible and others, SEMrush. There's a proliferation of tools that can help us be successful. You look at the science of marketing, right? The art used to be the words and pictures. That was really what marketing was, and there was no measurement in place. And that's why you have high levels of attrition for marketers generally. But the art, of course, is still critical. Your look and feel, your brand identity is critically important to being able to propagate your messaging and to have a continuity and a highly differentiated look and feel to be able to extend your marketing spend. So how do you differentiate, right? So brand identity, your messaging, the quality of the products and services that you provide. You're even differentiating around the emotion of the experience of making that purchase or engaging your organization in the services that you're acquiring or that they may be acquiring, and the experience itself. So, and that runs from healthcare to software, whatever the user experience. You're starting to see chief marketing officers also sort of become a little bit broader in terms of their scope of domain, which is now you have chief experience officers that also include sales and marketing. In some cases, you have chief revenue officers, but we're starting to see the user experience becoming more important and being folded into a senior level experience, senior level sort of leadership position now that encompasses marketing other elements of the experience. And then you differentiate purely by cost, right? That's the more commoditized version of marketing. That's an area where we don't want to play in. We want to be able to, through the other elements of brand, be able to substantiate a higher cost for whatever goods and services we're providing. So let me give you a sense of what we've done with Jupiter Medical Center. We were engaged in January. We've launched a very prolific multi-channel comprehensive program for them and give you a sense of sort of what we have done on their behalf in the last 8 months or so. Crisis can present an opportunity. When we came on board, we were thinking we're going to grow elective surgeries and patient volume for orthopedics and pediatrics and cancer and so forth by building awareness for those programs. And then COVID hit. And then I think, based on the recognition by the leadership team that the crisis really can present an opportunity. So while a lot of competitors were dialing back their marketing spend, furloughing employees, we recognized that COVID actually was an opportunity for us to build a brand based on our differentiators in terms of patient safety and quality. And then to use this opportunity to negotiate better rates from an advertising perspective, because advertisers were scaling back and they were discounting their rates significantly. So we took advantage of those things for the benefit of our particular client. We had leadership that was totally bought in to taking advantage of the opportunities. And then traditionally they had, disjointed campaigns. They were doing data sheets here and, data sheet here and data sheet there. They had rows of data sheets in their offices. We really said, let's put a multi-channel program together that actually has concentrated force. And then we built them, we took what is essentially their core position as the highest rated medical center and built our creative around that to support that. And that really hadn't been articulated in the market terribly well, or at least on a comprehensive and cohesive basis. So we launched the program. Let me share a little bit about what we inherited. This was the previous creative developed by another organization. This is kind of what we walked into. And, you really don't want to build a program around a knot, right? A double, negative. You want to go to market in a very positive, meaningful way to uplift people. So the whole knot campaign, while it launched, it had a slow rollout and it didn't last very long. We came in and recognized it probably wasn't the right positioning for us in the marketplace. And it looked sort of, eye stock and fairly not particularly creative. And then you've got a disjointed execution in terms of the brand identity, right? So on one hand, you've got straight lines, the introduction of yellow, and then on the other, you've got this curvy thing. So again, just with even 2 ads, you have a disjointed brand identity, which again, doesn't help you when you're starting to spend on advertising. You want there to be cohesiveness across your brand identity. So when we started to look at how we take them into the future, we wanted to focus on also technology, right? So they're an innovator in technology. They have remarkable capabilities that most people don't know exist here in the market. So, but the other thing we wanted to do is focus on what is great about Palm Beach. And you think about Palm Beach, you think Lilly Pulitzer, you think about pink. And so we looked at that yellow stripe and there really was no meaning behind that. So we said, let's look at some color alterations that are high impact and that speak to the community in which we all live in. And, comes to mind, the pink from Lilly is ever pervasive. The other component is that we recognize that, the sea grape, right, which grows prolifically throughout the Jupiter area, the spine of that particular plant is pink as well. So we're kind of tying it into a local angle, rooting it in authenticity, and then of course building on the brand that had already predated us, which is Lily. So we developed a completely different execution built around their core position as a leader in particular outcomes. And you can see that we developed a color palette that was highly distinctive, and really we wanted it to essentially explode off of the pages. So we went from this sort of drab, not sort of orientation to a much more colorful representation that's more cohesive with the area in which we live. And we came up with a tagline, which is, this is who you want, this is where you want to be. And when you think about a hospital, you don't want to be at a hospital, right? But if you're going to have to undergo medical care, this is where you want to be. And as we talked to the senior leadership and all of the employees in the organization, board members, it was pretty consistent. And I think when you're developing a brand position, you want it to be authentic. And, you know, when these conversations that we had, it really just came out naturally. They said, you know, if you're going to have someone that's sick, a family member, this is really where you want to be if you can't go out of market. And so we developed the tagline around that. And there's a certain level of irony around that as well. And then we've done some variation. So as you look at marketing specific doctors and specific specialties, we've made an alteration to the tagline, which is, this is who you want to see. So we're using them slightly interchangeably. Again, the creative, when you have a limited amount of resources from a media perspective, the creative needs to help you. So if you think about the competitors, which are fairly drab, the execution, they have to spend 10x the amount of creative on media spend that we're having to spend here, because our creative is so distinctive, whereas theirs is fairly bland and kind of vanilla. So they're having to pour a ton of money in being able to propagate something that's not highly distinctive. So the other component that we've done is really looking at, it looks like we're missing a slide here, but developing a multi-channel program. So we've got print, we've got billboards, you know, animated billboards in the airport. We've got virtual online groups through email that we're promoting. We've got television, we've got radio, a very comprehensive print program that's regionally focused, whereas they had particularly invested just in a small radius in and around Jupiter previously. So we're really focusing on their goal of becoming a regional player. And our media buys are now supporting that. So we're buying more regionally. We're looking at targeting patients up into the 4 counties north of us for cancer and other types of treatments that would lend themselves to patients traveling, whereas they might go to Orlando or Tampa had they not known that Jupiter had these particular capabilities. And then what we typically do is we put together integrated marketing plans. So from print to web development, PR, and they all have to sequence together, right? So the integration of these things together is what makes them successful and have impact. So if you're doing 1 or 2 of these, you know, you're probably not likely to have the outcome that you want. It's really the blending of all of these integrated channels that drives the intended effect that we want. And that's the challenge, right? And allocating the resources, how do you do that effectively? To be able to be, you know, in social media, to have enough budget to be able to actually make a difference and to own that channel and to do it really well. In some cases, you have to pull back on certain channels. A lot of organizations don't have the ability because of budget or talent or resources to be able to execute these types of programs. So how do you build the right foundation? So what has become commonplace now is what we call the MarTech stack. The MarTech stack, from our perspective, is essentially the amalgamation of all of these things together. So in the graphic that you see here is really the market opportunity. So if you look at what is the market sizing, what is the total addressable market for us, our particular niche or capability, depending on its consumer product or B2B, and then you develop the go-to-market, the brand and creative, the content around that to message that particular and differentiate that particular offering. You've got the data and analytics component of that, which I've shared with you a little bit, which is software underpinning all of the channel marketing that you're driving. And of course, once you acquire the customers, what's their experience, and are you developing the business processes around the experience to make that relationship go smoothly in order to increase the customer lifetime value. And then again, you have the underpinning of these systems and platforms, and then tying them together, integrating them, making them work together is a challenge, because most marketers don't have skill sets in some of these areas. And then on the left and the right side, you see what are traditionally the channels, and really tying them together. There's another view of that I'll share here, which is very similar. This is the stack itself. So you've got the market opportunity, the brand and creative, you've got the channels in the middle, and then again, you have the foundational elements that make marketing sustainable. And a lot of these things are fairly easy to deploy, whereas you used to be able to deploy an enterprise software. It required the IT department, their buy-in. You install it inside your enterprise. You'd have to negotiate with them. It was never a priority for IT. So it's really a challenge for marketing. Today, these things are pretty easy to deploy. You sign up, you can log in and create an account. You put a tracking code on your website, and within a matter of 30 minutes, and then the integration of these tools together has become more seamless. So you've got tools like Zapier. In some cases, like Pardot and other tools, they have a native integration with other tools so that they talk and work together. But again, a lot of amazing developments in this particular space. This is another stack of a particular company. So if you think about the acquisition process from awareness to measurement and everything in between. So this is kind of the ideal state. You've got Facebook marketing and the acquisition platforms, Instagram, LinkedIn, you've got AdRoll, Google AdWords, and then working your way through that process of conversion, you've got a whole host of tools, including Salesforce and Marketo, AdRoll, which is a display network, which is similar to a remarketing tool, actually, that allows you to remarket to your prospects that you're driving through Google AdWords or other types of paid networks. And then you've got some other tools that blend the experience, like Zendesk and Olark, which is a live chat solution. The Intercom is very similar to that. And then again, you have the measurement platforms, whether that be Whatograph or Google Analytics or Tableau, and then Visible, which is the one I shared with you earlier. So that's kind of a lot packed into a very short period of time. I hope I didn't go too fast. It's a lot to cover, but hopefully that was interesting and helpful to you. And I'd be delighted to take any questions that you may have.
Right. Thanks, Lou. I have a few questions, but I'll save that. I'll let the audience go first. If you have any questions, please just take yourself off mute or just write the question in the chat. Let me go ahead and check social media, see if there's any questions from there. 1 second. All right, so I'll go ahead and share one of my questions. Or actually, I think Mike had a comment. From your digital mix, when discussing data, how is Moving Minds positioning feedback to your clients towards handling the ever-growing privacy regulations along with the eventual removal of third-party cookie support?
That's an interesting question. So rephrase that for me one more time. There's a lot packed into that question.
So from your digital mix, when you're discussing data, how is Moving Minds positioning feedback to your clients towards handling the ever-growing privacy regulations along with the eventual removal of third-party cookie support?
Well, the laws have changed, right? You're in Europe, seeing they're a little bit ahead of the curve with regard to privacy considerations. So if you go to a website now, you have a notification that cookies are being used. There's a tool called CookieBot, which we use to essentially sort of ensure that we're in compliance with particular laws and regulations. CookieBot allows us to communicate through the interface. So you essentially put the tracking code on your website. It allows you to indicate to a user what types of cookies you're using. So there's a complete transparency with regard to that. And in some cases, that's actually a very cost-effective solution. And that sort of the act of compliance is really challenging because the laws change a lot. You've even got, I've even had clients that were approached by lawyers in regards to compliance with the Disabilities Act, right? Making sure that their alt tags are visible so that if you have a disability, whether it be blindness or color blindness or whatever those disabilities may be, that your site is in compliance. And if it's not, you may be experiencing a lawyer sending you a nasty letter and trying to extract money out of the organization. So that actually, there's a lot of tools that apply with those types of things, and they kind of take the burden of managing that because it is ever changing. So those companies have proliferated and allow you to sort of maintain compliance with those issues. without, as a marketer, having to keep up with those. So it requires a subscription, but CookieBot is one of those. On the the Disabilities Act, I don't recall the companies that are in that particular business, but a Google search, there's certainly a multitude of those that can help you on that particular front. And they're very different, as cookie compliance and the others disabilities compliance. So, and then in healthcare, you've got HIPAA compliance. So, there's issues. I had a client the other day who has landing pages which are not SSL secure, right? They don't have a certificate on all of this, and they've got landing page forms where patients are particularly entering information through this form, being submitted through an email script sent to the client, not dropping into HubSpot, which is, for example, a marketing automation tool that is, in fact, compliant with HIPAA. MailChimp is not compliant with HIPAA, by the way. So you've got a lot of regulatory complexity, but there are tools that help you sort of navigate that. But in this case, you've got a HIPAA violation potentially if that data gets exposed, and could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in the loss of a license to that medical provider. So these are critical issues, but there are a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of tools that are in these particular niches that can help you make sure that you're in compliance with each of these things.
Awesome. Thanks, Lou. And we also have another question on LinkedIn from Matthew Carson. He asked, can you give me 3 competitors of Visible?
Well, there are tools. I mean, Visible is probably the best in that particular space. Marketing automation tools like Marketo, Pardot, Salesforce to some extent, but it requires a ton of customization. They actually have built-in dashboards. There's another tool called SharpSpring, which is a company in Gainesville, which is a marketing automation tool. It's less expensive than the HubSpots of the world. Not as good, but but each of those has a dashboard. It's not quite what Visible is, but you can develop, funnels, for example, in SharpSpring. They're pretty effective, actually. So there are tools, and their roadmap is expanding the capabilities. They want to keep you invested in that platform, so they're launching new capabilities. But in terms of Visible, each of those solutions like Marketo, HubSpot, they all have dashboard components that you can build the funnel around, so you can model the funnel in that solution. But Visible's more of an enterprise class product. So companies like Amazon and but most companies don't have the budget to spend $60,000 on a Visible solution. So they can take advantage of what they are using. There's also solutions like Whatagraph, which is, again, as I mentioned, an aggregator of all of data and analytics, which is another tool which is fairly inexpensive. So again, there's a lot of capabilities out there to be able to create all of the things that we've discussed here today.
Awesome. And he had a question to follow that. Is ClickFunnels still relevant, or is Visible the next level?
Visible is another level, right? So, there are tools. ClickFunnels it depends on the industry, right? So again, and the level of investment. Most small to medium-sized businesses are not going to have the resources to invest in Visible. And that's why I said there are tools, there are capabilities within some of these other tools like HubSpot, which do allow you to have some of this capability. What was the question again? I sort of lost track there.
It was, is ClickFunnels still relevant?
Yeah, I mean, you see ClickFunnels being used by a lot of singular consultants, and you see it all the time on Facebook, right? So you see a consulting firm or a small sort of, a small company using ClickFunnels to develop an acquisition model. So I think that's like a low cost means. You've also got Instapage, which is a company that allows you to build landing pages and kind of do it on the fly. So you don't have to use web developers to do that, which is cumbersome and time intensive. So you can deploy solutions like Instagram or Instapage, where you can deploy a landing page and then integrate that with your AdWords campaigns, drop people into that, and the funnel around that. That's probably a more sophisticated tool than the ClickFunnels tool. And that's something that we've used on behalf of clients previously as well.
Awesome. So we also have another question in the chat from Crystal. And she said, thanks for sharing the GMC case studies and MM's work there. Are there plans to go deeper with developing personas and marketing segmentation to have more custom messaging based on where certain audience are in their healthcare journeys?
Wow.
I can
You know,
repeat that.
that's a level of sophistication that is even beyond what I've shared with you today. So, building the right, that's sort of like the multi-year process. So what we've talked about today is really building what can be built within 12 months, essentially. In some cases, we snap this on because we already have relationships with these software companies. We know what the tools do. We know based on the client's needs, what the right tool is, what their need is. So in some cases, like for example, we're trying to figure out how to attribute the acquisition source to the lifetime value and all of the data and the processes around that. But the level of personalization, I mean, you're talking about enterprise class software to be able to do that, and significant amount of investment. So, organizations like Penn, Mayo, they're doing some of that, but even that degree, I think you're seeing more customization on like Amazon and consumer products where they're recommending products to you based on your purchase history and things of that nature. What you've described in healthcare is not very commonplace. Based on my own experience, and it requires a massive amount of expenditure on the content side because you've got variations of content that have to be developed based on the journey. Just developing content for core service lines is a challenge for medium to small a small to medium sized organization. So again, that's a level of sophistication that you generally would see with a top 10 sort of grouping of healthcare systems that have 50 people in a marketing organization, 10 to 20 to $30 million budgets because of the complexity of implementing something like that. And I don't know that that's really hard to in fact correlate that investment. For me, I don't know that makes sense for every particular client. Does that help?
Crystal, did that help?
That's a multi-year process. I mean, that requires a lot of patience and a lot of buy-in and a lot of budget.
Agree. We were taking a look at it. The system I was at was more high level, like the baby boomers versus the millennials and how different tone of message as well as wording used would appeal to those different segments at a much higher level. Obviously, yeah, it gets more sophisticated as your markets and going down to specific points in the healthcare journey. But just wanted to know what where you go from here. I love what you've done with Jupiter Medical Center and the new look and feel. I just didn't know what next steps they were looking to go to.
Well, we're some of that's proprietary,
Sure.
but we're for what they're doing, it's remarkably sophisticated. And for a relatively medium-sized regional medical center, their marketing organization that we put in place is highly sophisticated. It's enterprise class, but there's stages of implementing those types of things. So the way that I view it is you do the blocking and tackling really well, and a lot of organizations, regardless of not even just Jupiter, but every organization that we generally come into, they don't do the blocking and the tackling very well. Just the basics. So it's one thing to even talk about high level complexity and massive amounts of expenditures. It's really hard to even, with CMOs that last 23 months, you think about that. Generally you're coming in, it's like football, right? You're coming in as a head coach, you're taking over a team that's 4-12, right? And you're turning it around. And you think about the challenge of doing that in the time frame. So they last on an average of 23 months. You think you have to build a team, if you're going to build an internal team, that takes, almost 9 to 12 months. It also depends on how much headcount you have budget for, whether it's 5 people. What we see generally is they hire an internal team based on marketing function. So PR, content, digital. And then what they do is they go out and hire an agency specific to that specialty, right? So that's our value proposition. So rather than going out and hiring internal resources that inevitably are going to need a third party partner, none of which those companies talk to each other, they're all scrapping for the budget, right? They're all advocating for SEO budget versus budget for branding or whatever other channels. So you have this dynamic that's very dysfunctional. They're all competing, they're not working together, they all hate each other, and even continuity with regard to ad content, right? So you think about if a digital company is doing the ad content and they're not sharing it with the folks that are doing all the content marketing so that there's a complete continuity of messaging. You know, in some cases they are doing that. If you've got a really strong leader and a CMO or VP of marketing, they're know how to manage that. But in a lot of cases, you have a lot of disjointed marketing and things don't work together properly. You've got, again, different fiefdoms that you're dealing with. And then you're spreading your budget across 5 to 7 different vendors, which is really not efficient use of that. And then, of course, the biggest thing is each of them rationalizes that you've got the reporting from each of them, right? So, the SEO company measures certain things in a certain way because they want to advocate for certain things. A lot of finger pointing happens in those situations, right? The SEO company blames the web development company because, and it becomes really, so the CMO is in a position where they've got to be the referee between all these vendors. And our value proposition is we just sort of eliminate that. You don't need an internal team. You just use fractional talent based on the need. And so someone comes in to implement marketing automation. We do that for 3 weeks. That person drops off the account. You're not hiring a full-time resource to do that, which obviously is $60,000 to $100,000 with benefits and salary and all that. You would take 25 people. We've actually got 25 people that work on one particular account, but not all of them work continuously, right? So we have 12 people on that account working continuously, managing their programs. But again, coming back to the CMO, they've got 23 months. They've got to build a team. Generally they're trying to turn around what is dysfunctional. They are inheriting relationships with agencies, which have to either be unwound or initiated. It's a very challenging thing. And then they have to put the foundations in. And by the time they get to 23 months, they're gone, and then you have to kind of start the whole process over again. So that's, as a marketer, as a creative, it's very challenging. There's more patience with a CFO, other COO, they last generally longer. I think on average, they last 4 years versus a CMO who lasts 23 months. So, our goal is to try to, on behalf of clients, implement an enterprise class marketing organization on an outsourced basis, and we do it in a matter of weeks rather than months. So we had a client that we worked with. They brought in a new director of marketing. They're finally getting almost 18 months after that person came on board to just rebranding, which is kind of astounding. We could have done that in a matter of 8 weeks, right? And could have already been developing and deploying all of their outbound programs. So they chose a different route. But here they are almost 2 years later and haven't done anything. So, and it's likely that person probably won't survive because they haven't implemented the changes that need to be implemented as quickly as they need to be implemented, frankly.
Right. Thanks, Lou, for that. And I just have a question because you mentioned kind of like, there's no need for a full team, but what are the different skill sets that you need to create a successful MarTech team? I know you mentioned a little bit about market automation, but I'm sure it's like Google Analytics, video, or can you share a little bit more about that?
Sure. I mean, that's the challenge that we face is, a lot of leadership, marketing leadership. If you're experienced, you generally have experience in all of these different channels, right? So, but as there are a lot of organizations that use, talent that is maybe not as experienced. And so, are they specialists in Google Ads, which is very unique in terms of targeting, using custom intent. Most people don't know how to do that, right? And then you've got content marketing, SEO. I mean, you've got a lot of, to use a war analogy, you've got a lot of battles out on you've got resources deployed, and you don't always need to hire full-time people because you can't actually do that. If you've got 20 different channels, and I'm not just talking about the platforms, I'm talking about just content development, web development, design, branding, messaging, PR, corporate communications. I mean, talking about 25 different areas of marketing. And the only way to be able to deploy that is to leverage third-party resources. But again, you're cobbling together different groups, different entities, most of which don't agree with each other. is disjointed. The reporting and the analytics part is not integrated. So you've got a lot of finger pointing in terms of who's driving real value and who's not. It's very complicated, but it's capable of, capable with the right leadership, the right level of experience to be able to orchestrate that. And that's kind of what we do, which is, as a fractional CMO, we try to orchestrate all of the different channels. But you don't need a full-time person to manage a marketing automation platform on a long-term basis. You really only need that resource for, maybe 6 to 8 weeks to get the organization up and running. You can either train those people that are internal, or you can, on a fractional basis, use that person for maybe 5 hours a week to deploy your email programs and so forth. So try to be smart about the allocation of labor. I think we're going to see with COVID in particular, a lot of marketing organizations were significantly impacted. In healthcare, when the elective procedures were frozen in March and April and May, a lot of these organizations are still getting back up and running, and their volume is being impacted. People are reluctant to get care. You had a lot of private equity companies basically just firing everybody in marketing because they recognize, like, am I going to carry that headcount for another 90 days to 120 days? And then the recovery process of people coming back. I mean, you look at New York, one of our clients is a dermatology company up there, one of the largest in the country. And, they're looking at just trying to get patients back. So they can't carry the headcount for 9 months if they're not actually if marketing expenditures right now, they can't actually service clients or patients and then just reconstituting. So in that case, I think the opportunity exists for people to look at how they source resources and talent in a very different way than they may have. You see other industries have, outsourcing, to India 10 years ago for call centers was kind of the initiator. Mm-hmm. But people are using outsourced finance. They're using outsourced, in some cases, operations and e-commerce. You're certainly using all outsourced solutions, right? Fulfillment that's outsourced, all types of things that are outsourced. So marketing is sort of the last thing to be outsourced. And so I think we're sort of at the forefront of what is, I think, going to be the proliferation of people recognizing there's different ways to staff and to source marketing organizations that are more flexible and scalable and more affordable.
Right. Right. All right. Well, thanks, Lou. If anyone has any last minute questions, speak up now because we're right about at time. But I just want to thank you, Lou. I mean, I've learned so much in just a short hour. And if you have any additional resources and information you want to share, I'll gladly send it to the attendees afterwards. It looks like we don't have any questions. So I hope you have a great weekend. I hope everybody has a great weekend. Stay safe and healthy. And we'll definitely see you guys next week for our next events.
Thanks, everybody, for joining. I appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
All right. Have a
Thank
great
you.
weekend. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.